Item 12 on the agenda, the report of the Assistant Director of Finance, medium-term financial planning for 2015 to 16 and above, really. And to agree the Council tax for 2015 to 16. Can I ask you, please? Can I ask you, please, to restrain from heckling? Can I ask you to restrain from heckling, please? If you don't desist, the meeting will adjourn. Okay. The Assistant Director. Can you? Okay. Can you please? If you do not desist, we will adjourn the meeting. Okay. Can we continue? Okay. You're getting very, very upset now. You're getting very upset now. I would expect the carers to support her. Please. Okay. You know, I think you've made your point. You really have. And we now need to continue with the meeting. So can I please ask the Assistant Director of Corporate Governance and Monitoring Officer to give the meeting some advice in respect to the voting changes which were introduced by the Government in February 2014. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Local Authorities Standing Orders England Amendment Regulations 2014 and the Council's Standing Orders require the Council to record in the minutes how each councillor voted, including any abstentions when determining the Council's budget and the level of council tax to be levied. As the only requirement is to record in the minutes of the meeting how each member voted, and given that there are 6 amendments and a substantive motion to be voted on, it could be recorded in the minutes of the meeting how each member voted, including any who have abstained, by a show of hands.
Can I therefore ask that the advice is noted and acted on when we come to the voting on this item? This does not preclude 8 members from requesting a recorded vote under the current Council procedural rules. Is that agreed? Okay, the process for considering the item will be as follows. I will first call upon the Cabinet Member for Resources and Culture, Councillor Arthur, to introduce the report and move the recommendations contained within. Councillor Arthur will be allowed 15 minutes to do so, up to 15 minutes to do so, and this will be seconded by the Leader of Council, and she will have up to 5 minutes. There will then be 6 amendments to the budget from the opposition, followed by Councillor Elliott, who will speak for up to 7 minutes in total, and then seconded by Councillor Engbert for up to 3 minutes. There will then be a debate. The debate will be for around 45 minutes or less, and members are asked to keep their contributions to 3 minutes or less. I will only consider allowing further time if there are a large number of members wishing to speak on this item. At the conclusion of the debate, Councillor Elliott will respond for up to 5 minutes, followed by Councillor Arthur for up to 10 minutes. The Council will then vote on each of the 6 amendments in turn, followed by substantive recommendations. So, can I first start by asking Councillor Arthur to address the meeting for up to, just remind myself, up to 15 minutes if you need it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, again. So, you asked a question directly, which one of us would respond to you, and I guess that will be me. Do I have any experience of being vulnerable or being bullied or having services shut down? No, I don't. Some of us will do, some of us won't. What I can say is that every single councillor in this room, regardless of the cynicism, regardless of the attacks, regardless of how many of you think we're just happy to implement Tory cuts, what I can say is that not a single councillor came into this room in order to cut services. We came into politics, we came into local government because we genuinely wanted to make our communities better, because we thought there was an important role that we could play in actually ensuring that services work for local people, that we recognise that local government has a role to play in helping people to live fulfilling lives, healthy lives, in communities that keep them safe. But the fact is, sadly, I come to this chamber tonight echoing the words that have been said already by other councillors and cabinet members, that the financial challenge that this council faces is unprecedented. We have cut £117 million out of our budget over the last 5 years. Over the next 3 years, we estimate to cut another 70 million. That's a 60% cut. A 60% cut. That is staggering. £6 out of every 10 will be lost by 2018 to 19. You do that to any individual, any family, and they will suffer because of that. It is nothing short of a disgrace. Nothing short of a disgrace that this wretched Tory Lib Dem government thinks that it's fair that places like Haringey, boroughs like Haringey, deserve a cut 7 times greater than wealthier boroughs like Richmond. That's £300 less for every Haringey resident because of what the Tories and the Lib Dems have done. despite the fact that Haringey is the 13th most deprived local authority in the country. Now, Councillor Coburn mentioned it earlier, and I do think it's important to restate this, to contextualise where we are. We were told that we wouldn't be in this situation. We were told back in 2010 that the austerity by the government would see that by 2015 things would be fixed, that the deficit would be cleared. Despite the fact that Labour said back then that the proposed cuts were too far and too fast, we were ignored. And now we see the impact of your incompetence. Now we see, with £75 billion remaining of our deficit, borrowing £200 billion more than was planned, the slowest recovery for over 100 years, tax cuts for millionaires, whilst Haringey residents are £1,600 worse off. Now we see the impact of your failures. Two things should be clear. Number one, that the government's economic plans by its own criteria have failed. But secondly, that the austerity that we have seen over the last 5 years hasn't simply been about balancing the books. If it was, then the government would be doing much more to tackle the £100 billion lost every year to tax avoidance and to tax evasion, rather than attacking the welfare state. The government has used the last 5 years to essentially try and complete what Maggie started, to slash public services and to roll back the state to levels not seen since the 1930s. And sadly, local government has borne the brunt of the coalition's economic incompetence. Despite Cameron describing local government as, and I quote, officially the most efficient part of the public sector, its funding has been cut by 40% over the last 5 years. That's 70 million now anticipated for Haringey. That means Croydon anticipating another £100 million to cut. Hackney, £87 million to cut. Our local services have been decimated by the mistakes of the coalition government. Perhaps we should expect nothing less from Tories when in government. I certainly don't. But what is shocking, I have to say, is the complicity of their Lib Dem stooges. Councillor Elliott, perhaps when you give your remarks, you could explain how a party that helped to build the welfare state, the party of Lloyd George, of Beveridge, of Kings, in just 5 years has become the party of Thatcher.
You were all complicit in it.
What's remarkable is that even Tories, like Martin Tett, the leader of Buckinghamshire County Council, or David Hodge, the leader of Surrey Council, have hit out against the savagery of these cuts. And yet, what's even more remarkable is the complete lack of contrition from the local Lib Dems. No acceptance of responsibility. No acknowledgement that their party is complicit in making the lives of the vulnerable harder. No apology for the devastating impact their cuts have had on Haringey residents. Let's be clear, and I say this particularly after the nonsense that has been going out on Twitter, on your website this weekend, celebrating supposed victories over the Labour group in this council, that we won't take any lectures from Liberal Democrats, a party whose local MP is a minister in this Tory-led government, despite having positioned herself to the left of Labour for the last decade, a minister who voted for the catastrophic £3 billion top-down reorganisation of the NHS, who voted for the cruel and unfair bedroom tax, who pledged, with Nick Clegg, not to raise VAT on ordinary hard-working families, but then did just that, who promised to abolish tuition fees and then voted to treble them. And now we have the ultimate act of hypocrisy. Our local Lib Dem MP and our Haringey Lib Dems, who voted in Westminster, our local Lib Dem MP, for these cuts, for the £187 million lost by 2018 to 19, now with the audacity to come and campaign against them locally. Audacity so criminal that I would march her down myself to the local police station if she hadn't already tried to shut them all. Let there be no doubt that the cuts we face are Lynn Featherstone's cuts. These are your cuts. It's dishonest for you to portray yourself as concerned bystanders when you have done nothing to protect Haringey residents from what quite simply is an ideological attack on the state. So what do these cuts mean for Haringey? Well, sadly, there is no doubt that we are left with some invidious choices to make. As was said earlier, over the last 4 years, we have done everything that we can to protect frontline services. Adult social care has received a 4% cut over the last 5 years, compared to 42% cut to our central services. But when you have 70 million worth of cuts to deliver on top of 117 million, that's left us with little room for manoeuvre. There have been many criticisms about the budget consultation and the extent to which it has enabled people to engage with our proposals. I admit it's unfortunate that it's been so constrained. What we wanted to do was ensure that at least residents had the opportunity to engage with the proposals. Unlike many other boroughs, we presented all the information that we had. And I do say this: I thank the residents who have engaged with the process, and to ensure that people feel confident and comfortable about next steps, we will ensure that we continue to engage with residents as proposals are developed post the budget. There is deep cynicism about the extent to which the politicians within this room take the decisions that we're about to make lightly. I can assure you that we absolutely do not. Hearing and reading residents' representations during the budget consultation about the positive difference that the Council has made to their lives has actually been deeply moving for many of us. In recent weeks, we've all received emails, letters, visits to our surgeries from residents who are understandably anxious and concerned and angry about proposed cuts to important and treasured local services. I can only repeat the point that Councillor Goldberg made back at the Cabinet earlier this month. To those who think that local government is a soft target, who think that all we do is collect bins and fill potholes, let them listen to the representations of the people in this room. Now, the fact is that when we are left with these difficult choices, unfortunately, we have to make difficult decisions when it comes to social care. 5 out of every £10 that we spend goes to the provision of care in this borough, which makes it almost impossible to leave untouched. We realise the value that day centres and residential homes provide, not only for users, but for the carers too. And what we do commit to doing, just re-emphasising what Councillor Morton said, is to make sure that we engage with user groups, and we will invest in advocacy, £20,000 to ensure that their voices are heard. Now, just quickly addressing how we approach tackling this financial challenge. Some have said that we shouldn't even go ahead with passing a budget. They say that we should simply refuse to do it. I have to say that I don't believe that is the right approach. To do that would simply mean that government commissioners would come in, they would slash and burn local services, and we were elected in a difficult context, in a difficult financial context for this council to do everything that we can for our residents, and I believe that we should take on that responsibility. Setting a 3-year plan means that we don't salami slice. If we do need to change our approach in a new financial context in which we'll be much more reliant on local sources of income, then it's important that we set forward how we're going to achieve that and think in the medium to long term. To only set a 1-year budget would mean that we would only be taking short-term measures, and I don't think that that is right for the residents of this borough. It's also, as was mentioned earlier, in line not only with 70% of London boroughs, but also 70% of Labour boroughs who have chosen to set a multi-year budget. And when it comes to reserves, we are using our reserves, 4.3 million over the next 3 years, in order to help smooth over the cuts, but they are one-off and cannot be used to tackle underlying funding issues. Finally, with council tax, some argue that we should just hike it up. But let's be clear, council tax is one of the most regressive forms of taxation this country has, disproportionately hitting the poor. And if we were to raise it by 2%, the amount at which, if we were to go above, we would have to have a local referendum, we would only raise £600,000, which is nowhere near enough to tackle that £70 million gap. So the easiest thing for us to do would be to passively administer these cuts and accept the decline of the council's capacity to improve the lives of its residents. But we reject that approach. We must refuse to simply accept that our borough must go backwards. Over the last 5 years, despite the fact that we have cut £117 million from our budget, we still have been able to freeze council tax for 5 years to help raise Haringey's exam results above the national average and to ensure that our parks, our green spaces, are officially among the best in the country. It's going to be even harder to keep moving this borough forward. But this budget, I genuinely believe, will help us to do that. We will freeze council tax for the 6th consecutive year in succession. That will save the council taxpayer in this borough £150 by the end of 2015 to 16, which is hugely helpful for those who are facing difficulties making ends meet.
But not for those who are losing their jobs.
At a time when libraries are being cut across the country, we have committed to protect all of our 9 libraries, and this budget will enable us to do that. In fact, it will enable us to invest in our libraries. A recent national report on libraries showed that 1/3 of people use their local library, and in areas of deprivation it's up to 50%. We know that libraries are treasured parts of our community, and we intend to keep them that way. We will spend £25 million on our roads and our pavements and on street lighting, making them safer for pedestrians, drivers and cyclists, supporting our businesses to move and to grow. We'll focus on regeneration, ensuring that, particularly in Tottenham and Wood Green, we can improve the lives of local people and lever in £1 billion worth of investment to create more jobs and build new homes. And although we cannot solve the housing crisis in Haringey alone, with building at the lowest level since the 1920s, rents in London rising by 10% a year, we can still do our bit, which is why we'll invest £28 million into building new homes, why we'll spend £32 million to improve the quality of our existing council stock, and why we will spend £450,000 to create a lettings agency and a licensing scheme to protect private sector tenants. This is a difficult time for us, and as Labour politicians, many of us are feeling uncomfortable. That's absolutely right. We should be absolutely clear that the situation that we find ourselves in is not due to our making, despite whatever Councillor Engert may say, but due to the irresponsible decisions of the coalition government. But in spite of that context, in spite of that challenge, we will do everything that we can with the resources that are at our disposal to ensure that we continue to tackle inequality, that we continue to empower communities, that we continue to strengthen our borough as much as we can. All of us are here to make Haringey the best borough to live and work, and this budget will enable us to do that. Madam Mayor, I move the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. Councillor Coburn, can I now ask you to speak?
Madam Mayor, at this stage, can I formally second the budget and reserve my right to speak?
Okay, Councillor Elliott, can I ask you now to speak?
Times are tough. All political parties, including Labour, have made it pretty clear that whoever is in government, local councils will continue to face reduced budgets. I applaud the decision to set a 3-year budget, and I think more strategically about the changes we need, and think more strategically about the changes we need to make as the council moves forward into a future where there can be less reliance on money from central government, regardless of which of the major parties is in power. The challenge that faces us as local politicians is how to deal with this situation. Quite rightly, the emphasis should change to delivering the right outcomes rather than merely providing services. But cuts need to be made. Which services should be reduced? And perhaps most importantly, what can we do differently to deliver good outcomes for our residents now there is less money? And let us be careful, there are services which should not be reduced. The Liberal Democrats believe that Labour's proposed budget for the Council includes some reasonable choices. We also believe it contains some unwise choices. Firstly, as you're all aware, we have real concerns about Labour's plans for the few remaining residential and daycare centres in Haringey. These centres provide vital services which result in good outcomes for vulnerable people with extremely complex needs and their carers. The Lib Dems believe thought should be given to the current plans to shut some centres and hand others over to outside organisations. The Council could be doing so much more with these centres, and my Lib Dem colleague, Councillor Connor, has already suggested in scrutiny meetings several very sensible ways to better utilise centres so this borough can keep vital services at lower cost. And then there are the proposed cuts to children's centres and the impact that will have on local families right across the borough. The very first principle underpinning your 5 priorities is about prevention and early intervention. So why cut centres that provide that vital early intervention work? So we believe that the budget proposals before us tonight could be improved. The Lib Dems propose that at least some of the services which we all care about can be retained by trimming council office functions more. We need to be able to prove to residents we've got every last bit of slack from our internal systems before we cut the services that are the main reason we're here. Residents shouldn't be able to point to money the council wastes on agency staff, long-term consultants, through inefficiencies and IT projects with spiralling costs, to name but a few. For example, information obtained by FOI shows the council spent nearly £14 million on agency staff in the financial year 2013 to 14. It's often claimed that some vital frontline jobs like social work can only be filled using agency staff, but less than 1.5% of that was spent on social workers. Council claims quite rightly to want to place customer needs at the centre of what we do. So why are we not listening to what they are telling us so loudly? Okay, moving on to our proposed amendments. Our first amendment is to install green street lighting more quickly, introduce weekly collections on the streets that need it, and employ town centre managers. This will be paid for by reducing agency staff spending by 3%. That's £418,000. Our second amendment is to reduce the savings made for early years and children's centres by half. This will be paid for by cutting communications spending. Our third amendment is to follow the administration's example of previous years and reduce spending on facilities time in order to pay for youth workers. Our fourth amendment is to keep the Haven Centre open for at least the next 3 years by reducing salaries of top managers at the council by 10%. Our fifth amendment is to fund a one-off business support scheme and deliver a more ambitious housing programme paid for with an unused business reserve, and I will speak briefly on this in a moment. Our sixth amendment is to provide safe crossings for every school and install a lift in Muswell Hill Library. This will be paid for by not putting customer services in Marcus Garvey Library and instead placing the service in one of the main council properties in Wood Green. My colleagues will speak on the other amendments, but I want to discuss our fifth amendment, which is intended to boost local businesses and housing. As someone who has run a small business and is probably one of the few people in the borough to like the Technopark, we had a small office there for years, I think the council could be thinking harder about supporting small local businesses, although not by keeping the Technopark open, I grant you. Some good work is being done in Tottenham, but other parts of the borough need help too. Small businesses in those parts of the borough have just as much to offer and can contribute just as much. Supporting local business boosts the local economy, invigorates local high streets and provides jobs
Councillor
for local
Elliott,
people.
can you wind up, please?
And brings in more business rates. There is a one-off pot of capital money to the tune of £750,000 sitting unused in the One Borough, One Future Fund. We'd use a portion of this to introduce a small to medium business support fund for local businesses, and we'd use a small portion of this fund to expand the remit of the scoping exercise for the proposed development company so that work for building houses proposed in Tottenham and Wood Green is developed further to enable the council to build more homes across the whole of the borough.
Councillor Elliott.
I very much hope you'll consider voting for some of our amendments, or all of them. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Engert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second Councillor Elliott's budget amendments. And I will now speak in support of the Lib Dem Budget Amendment 6 to the capital account, which has 3 proposals. Unlike Councillor Arthur with his general election speech, I'd like to get back to local choices. The number of killed and injured on Haringey roads is rising. One of the most vulnerable groups are children, and it is vital that they are protected on their journey to and from school. We therefore propose a capital fund to allow schools and parents who believe their school needs a new pedestrian crossing to bid for one to protect young lives. Shortly after I was elected as a new councillor in 2004, I met a wheelchair-bound mother who couldn't take her children to the wonderful children's library on the first floor of Muswell Hill Library. Since then, I have repeatedly asked that a lift is installed and have now found it would only cost £100,000 to put in a lift, which would finally kill any remaining arguments to relocate the library. I beg you to back action rather than words over accessibility for all and support this proposal. Finally, we would support a safe crossing on Bedford Road in Alexandra Wood, which has been a long-standing request by local residents. And where would the capital come from for these three worthy and important projects? By shaving off £2 million of the £5 million proposed for moving customer services and housing staff to Marcus Garvey Library, and instead move them to the many under-occupied council buildings in Wood Green, at the centre of the borough with its excellent transport links. And of course, leaving the library space at Marcus Garvey to continue to serve the area as a library. I don't only care about Muswell Hill Library. I urge you to support this amendment. Thank you. I urge you to support this amendment to safeguard young lives and improve access for disabled children and carers. May I just remind the party opposite that the outgoing Labour Chief Secretary to the Treasury left a note. Calm. For his incoming Liberal Democrat counterpart, saying there is no money left. Not only did the Labour government use up all the money, it ran up huge debts for future generations. The hugely expensive private finance initiatives that Labour set up for building projects, I think including Hornsey Central Clinic, which is a lift project, in the NHS and for schools, where money was borrowed but will not be paid back many times over, will continue to bleed the NHS dry for years to come. And of course it was Labour who cozied up to the city and its bankers under Blair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there will now be a debate on this item for a period of half an hour maximum. And I suggest that each member who wants to contribute should speak for no more than 2 minutes. I'll consider allowing further time, but I don't think that's, in fact, going to be possible. Okay, so who would like to speak first? I think I've got a list of people who want to speak. Can I start with Councillor Connor, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Haven is recognised as a daycare centre that provides excellent facilities for residents with high level of care needs. People with dementia, physical disabilities and mental health problems are given high quality individual care in a safe setting. Haringey Council needs to save £70 million over 3 years and are proposing to shut the Haven to contribute to these savings. We are proposing an alternative. Reducing the salary of the 22 most senior managers by 10% would enable the Haven to remain open. In a time of austerity, we have to prioritise where to spend taxpayers' money. People recognise that family carers are the backbone of our social care system. This can often only be sustained if carers have the support of a daycare centre, such as the Haven, which can give them just a couple of days' respite each week to do all the other 101 things needed to keep their own homes running. If we take away daycare centres such as the Haven, which provide the support that carers need to keep going, then we could end up with carers no longer able to cope. The council then becomes the safety net, with all the increased costs that come with it. I therefore believe shutting these centres will cost more in the long run than will be saved in the short term. Not only does it make financial sense to keep the centres open, but we need to be confident as councillors that we've done everything in our power to protect those who rarely have a voice. The most vulnerable in our society need us to support the services they rely on. So please vote to keep the Haven open. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Can I ask Councillor Wright now, please?
Thank you. It's been made clear that in Haringey, along with local government as a whole, we're facing outrageous and unjustified cuts, more than 50% in real terms, with the hardest pressed areas targeted for the biggest cuts. These are David Cameron's cuts, they're George Osborne's cuts, and let's make no mistake about it, they're Lynn Featherstone's cuts. You just take a look at, say, publicwhip.org website, tracking MPs' voting records. Time after time, again, Lynn Featherstone has voted strongly to reduce the spending power of local government and for the unfair measures that have seen cuts of over 100 million in Haringey, 70 million to come. She and her party have been cheerleaders for George Osborne and David Cameron. Have a look at her Twitter when George Osborne's making his autumn statement. So it's more than unedifying to see the Lib Dems tonight at their old game of playing politics with people's lives in this borough. Voting for the cuts nationally and then opposing them locally. Scare stories about library closures, promising things they know they can't deliver with figures that don't add up. We're at a cliff edge in local government. They've taken us there, and that's the reality that we've got to face. They want the people of this borough to continue to pay the price for their failed economic plan. Well, that does mean there's difficult decisions. We've heard about those this evening already. And people should be no doubt that we've agonised on this side about these decisions and listened to those who put the case for their services. And what I've heard time and time again is the need for certainty, clarity in an unprecedented situation. We can oversee the decline of public services for vulnerable people year on year, or we can take responsibility, face the reality of the situation we're in, chart a different way based on Labour principles to protect our communities as best we can. And that's why I will support a Labour budget which seeks to meet that challenge, early help and intervention, working with our communities for new homes, new jobs, new opportunities for our people. It won't be easy. It won't be easy. That's the reality we're in. I know. But the alternative, back to the 1930s with the Tories and the Lib Dems, is not something Labour in Haringey should countenance.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Can I ask Councillor Barbara Blake if she would like to say something?
Well, I agree with both Councillor Arthur and Councillor Wright in their comments about the cuts. These cuts are the result of the Conservative-led and Lib Dem coalition government, which is cutting our funding. The deficit is getting bigger as tax revenues dry up, and while they may trumpet that unemployment may be falling, what we are actually seeing in Haringey, as across the country, are more zero-hour contracts, fixed-term appointments, pay freezers, short-term jobs where no one can plan for their future. Many people go to work in this borough and across London, earning a wage which they cannot make ends meet, however frugal they are. How can anyone plan for the future under these circumstances? And no one in Haringey should do a hard day's work for less than they can live on. That is why it is so important to Haringey that we have an economic plan that will drive growth and employment, from which everyone can benefit. And by developing clear economic development plan, we can attract new businesses to this borough. Stable employment can contribute to so much, not least to better health. A good paying job makes it easier for workers to live in healthier neighbourhoods, provide quality education and childcare, and buy nutritious and good food, all of which affects health and well-being. Unemployed people face numerous challenges beyond a loss of income. With respect to mental health alone, studies carried out by Mind show that unemployed people were far more likely to be diagnosed with depression. In Haringey, we have higher levels of joblessness than both the London and national average. We need to know more about what is driving this and what we can do to tackle it, along with improving the life chances for everyone,
but especially for those people who are unemployed or not in skilled employment. I support the strategy set out in the corporate plan to identify priority sectors and to help firms in those sectors to locate and grow and create jobs
Councillor
in this
Blake,
borough.
could you wind up, please?
I believe we need to encourage a thriving local business, and I welcome the good work which has begun to bring more small and medium-sized businesses to Haringey. And let me say this, I believe employers should pay all workers a decent living wage, and everyone should have the opportunity to join a recognised trade union and be part of that trade union. Our top priority has to be fighting inequality and improving life chances, whether we live in the east and the west of the borough, and I believe we are putting the building blocks in place to achieve this goal.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start by saying that I have visited many of the children's centres in Haringey, and I've spoken to lots of the staff. They understand and accept that cuts have to be made, and they believe that they're able to absorb some of the cuts and still provide the vital services to vulnerable families, but not at the cuts at the level proposed. We are therefore proposing to halve the cuts to the early years budget so that the children's centres would need to make savings of £731,000 over 3 years instead of £1.4 million. This would be funded by cutting the communications and marketing budget. The budget for 2015 and 16 is £1.226 million, and we would reduce this by half and therefore save £613,000. And I know that this is proposed by the Lib Dems at every full council budget meeting, and it is never supported by the Labour group. But with the brutal cuts that Haringey has been forced to make over the next 3 years, it is now time to stop producing the Haringey people. This costs £96,000 a year for 6 issues, and as a council, we cannot justify spending almost £100,000 on a glossy magazine when so many cuts have been made to public services. Can I add for Councillor Wright's benefit that the Haringey's Assistant Director of Finance costed the Lib Dem amendments, so unless he doesn't know what he's doing, and I don't believe that's the case, the Lib Dems are proposing cuts that can actually be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Can I go to Councillor Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I think is quite astonishing is that the party opposite and the government expect us, as a Labour Party in Haringey, to run a 21st century council on a 1930s budget. We are absolutely determined, in the face of these incredible cuts, to stand up for our residents, and I believe that the housing and regeneration sections of our budget and our plan show some of the ways that we want to do that. Firstly, we are absolutely determined to stand up for residents who need a new home. And I'm really proud that after months and months of hard lobbying by councillors and officers of Haringey, on Friday it was announced that we're one of only 9 housing zones. That will bring us £45 million and 2,500 new homes, half of which will be affordable. Secondly, we are absolutely determined to protect residents who are at the mercy of the private rented market, and that's why in a few weeks' time I'll be announcing the launch of our new ethical, low-cost lettings agency, intervening directly in the lettings market to protect the most vulnerable. Thirdly, we're absolutely determined to bring more affordable homes and to make those available for local residents. That's why we're investing in new council houses. That's why we're investing in new shared ownership properties, some of which were given the green light by the Planning Committee just the other day. And that's why across the borough we're bringing thousands of affordable homes. But we're also determined to bring the long-term changes that residents want through major investment in Tottenham and major improvements just starting to bring homes, jobs and businesses to Wood Green. But we're clear that throughout all of this, we're determined to improve the life chances of our residents. That's why we opened 6 months ago a new apprenticeship academy in Hornsey to make sure that young apprentices are going into all of the construction sites in our borough. That's why we're bringing thousands of jobs through regeneration. That's why we've protected lifetime tenancies in our council homes. So to conclude, Madam Mayor, we must deliver growth. where this government is completely failing. We must deliver housing, where this government has caused the most severe housing crisis since the 1920s, and we must defeat this government at the election in May. Councillor Engert said we should focus our mind on local choices. There's a very clear local choice on the 7th of May, and I know which way I'll be voting.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Strickland. Councillor Goldberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say, I never thought I'd utter these words after May, but bring back Councillor Richard Wilson, because quite frankly, Madam Mayor, what an absolute shower we've heard tonight from the Liberal Democrats. They want to paint themselves. Let's quote Pippa Comma. She said, "Oh, but we've been asked to stand up for the people." Well, where has your party been for the last year? Well, we've faced tougher cuts than Richmond. And even tonight, Gail, when Councillor Arthur's talking about how Richmond are basically getting off scot-free, you're going, "Oh, but you don't understand what it's like in Richmond." Well, I'll tell you what's worse, is that you don't understand what it's like in Haringey. You don't understand what our residents really need and why they have returned a Labour council. So let me be really clear. We've got no time for your jelly and ice cream politics that throws out scares to people in our borough. Only an hour ago you tweeted that we're closing Marcus Garvey Library. Will you be wise to listen to the words of Marcus Garvey? He said those who serve themselves only end up just doing that, being amongst themselves. Well, that's what's going to happen to you here. It's what's going to happen to Lynn Featherstone and Horndywood Green, and it's what's going to happen to Nick Clegg in Sheffield Hallam. Let me be really clear about why I'm proud, absolutely proud, to be voting in favour of this budget tonight. Because as difficult as the cuts are, well, if you listen, I will tell you. As difficult as these cuts are, they represent a democratic socialist agenda. For the first time, we are putting first and foremost 5 very clear strategies that are behind it. A budget that is built on 5 clear priorities. Every child with the best start in life. What's not socialist about that? All adults living healthy and fulfilling lives. What's not socialist about that? A place where people are proud to live. What's not socialist about that? Homes and communities built for the first time in 20 years. What's not socialist about that? And driving growth in jobs and committing to full employment. What is not socialist about that? And why? Why? Because absolutely, really clearly within our proposals, within our budget papers tonight, within our corporate plan, one goal and one goal alone at the heart of it, a commitment to equality. And there's only one party in this country that's prepared to commit to equality, that's prepared to make the choices to make sure that we move forward, create jobs, build homes. That's the kind of council that Beatrice Potter imagined that we would build when she formed the Labour Party in the 1930s. And I encourage people to read her papers, because we will deliver that vision in Haringey. We will deliver that promise. We will deliver equality, and we'll deliver a Labour agenda here in Haringey. Thank you very much.
Councillor Engert. Councillor Engert. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am speaking to support our Budget Amendment 1, which contains 3 proposals. As Councillor Morris pointed out, all our amendments have been fully costed by the same finance officers who signed off your budget proposals. Firstly, the introduction of bi-weekly rubbish collections has blighted some areas with multiple overfilled and overflowing bins, as identified in the Cabinet member's own scrutiny report, which recommended the option to return to weekly collection for certain roads. Many bins have to be permanently sited on the public footway, impeding pedestrians as well as blocking the light and view from lower ground floor flats. Labour's rubbish policy is causing some residents to live in streets which regularly resemble rubbish tips. The few most badly affected roads are listed in the amendment, and a return to weekly rubbish collection for just these few roads would infinitely improve life for residents there, as well as those passing by. The Council timeframe of 13 years to achieve borough-wide LED lights on street columns is also just unacceptable. By investing to speed up this timetable, carbon savings would be made earlier, costs would be lower, and personal safety for our residents enhanced. Our town centres, they provide precious employment, business rates to support council services, and places for recreational enjoyment. Keeping them vibrant and attractive places to visit is fundamental to the long-term stability of the Council. We have some wonderful traders groups and many innovative and small-scale imaginative events. Investing in town centre management will underpin these initiatives, allow the Council to coordinate and maximise the town centre offers. And where will we get the funding for these? Scandalously, the Council spent over £12 million in 2013-14 on agency staff, not including social workers. Cut that budget by just £418,000 and all 3 projects could be funded. Or what about the consultant paid £450 per day for nearly 2 years? What an appalling use of council tax. Please support our amendment.
Okay. Finally, can I ask Councillor Meehan, who wanted to speak? Is that right? No? Okay, that's good. Councillor Morton, then, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This government has cut Haringey's funding, it's failed on its deficit programme, and we as a Labour Council, responsible for our residents, have got to find ways to continue to provide services despite what the government has done to our budgets. We must therefore, with less money, try and ensure that resources are used as fairly as possible to support as many people as well as possible. That means spending money to support people, not buildings. I've said many times before that everyone deserves as much independence and choice as possible. That is behind, as a principle, what we're proposing in the adult sector. Where people are able to access services in the community, we want to enable them to do this. Promoting independence and supporting choice must be at the heart of what we do. On some of the specific points that have been raised tonight by the opposition, we currently spend £3.4 million per year on 4-day centres. Around 130 people benefit from these services. No new users have been placed with the services in the last 4 years. Continuing with this current model is not affordable, and it does not meet the tests of equality and fairness, choice or independence for others who rely on adult services. On the Roundway, it would require in the region of £300,000 to make the building fit for purpose. In contrast, Ermine Road is purpose-built, it has extensive care facilities, and it affords the people who use it currently dignity and respect. We know the staff who provide services at the Roundway have specialist knowledge. It comes in part from the Haringey Learning Disabilities Partnership, a multi-specialist team that we have. There are no plans to change this team. Expertise will continue to be provided, regardless of the setting. The fact, though, is that spending £300,000 on capital investment at the Roundway and £730 each year to keep £30,000 each year to keep that centre open would simply move pressure to other budgets, and it would require us to reduce services elsewhere. The same arguments apply to the Haven. Some service users will still require a physical hub, and we respect that. I would like, in closing, just to speak once again on the issue of care packages. In this budget, we had a choice. We had difficult decisions. People have spoken tonight about core beliefs. This Labour administration chose to put £5.7 million back into care packages because that is the thing we can do more than anything else that will do most to support vulnerable people. That is a choice. That is a Labour choice, and it's one I'm proud to stand by.
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Councillor Georgie.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And mindful of the fact that time is brief, I'll cut my remarks right down. I only want to say a few words tonight, both about the really rather petty games played by the opposition over recent weeks and about my role as the Cabinet Advisor for Libraries and our commitment to Haringey's library service. Madam Mayor, I'm very happy to hear the views and comments of local people, but I'll take no lectures from an opposition who represent a party, who canvass for a party, and who support an MP and government minister who is up to her eyeballs in these cuts. Right? They know they're in the wrong, and that's evident by the fact that they're being very quiet this evening. Very quiet this evening. They're very loud in their leaflets. They go right across the borough, but they're being very quiet this evening indeed. And I noticed, Madam Mayor, that Councillor Engert, she's getting a lot of name checks this evening, maybe she should be leader in May, mentioned last Friday that it wasn't her party who left a note in the Treasury after the last general election, but I'm going to be gentle with you. I'm going to say it gently. My 6-year-old brother could tell you that the reason why the Labour Party had to spend so much money in the last government was not because of overspending, but because of lack of regulation, because of a recession caused by the banks and excess from hedge fund managers, not by investing in schools and hospitals and local authorities, the kind of investment that allowed Labour Haringey to create the services we are now being forced to cut back tonight. And a word on our libraries, Madam Mayor. I was particularly pleased to have been offered the chance to work on our libraries with Councillor Arthur because of our commitment to keeping all 9 open despite the cuts we've had to face. A decision that I believe was really important, and that's why the political games played by the Liberals, standing grim-faced outside Muswell Hill Library, a library that's not threatened, was so disingenuous indeed. There is a library in Muswell Hill, N10, London Borough of Haringey now, and there will be one at the end of this administration. Simple as. Only Lynn Featherstone, Madam Mayor, and her pals, the last 9 remaining, would think that residents of this borough would be fooled by a campaign... Last 3 sentences, lines. Would be fooled by a campaign to save something that is not threatened. It is, to quote one Liberal Democrat, Madam Mayor, playing on the fears of local people. No time for fear games in this borough. No time for fear games. Why are you playing them along? I'm not playing anything. I hear you. I hear you, right? These are the guys who handed this down to us. A game to hide their total complicity in the cuts we face, and this is a game they simply cannot and won't win.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Ross, please.
Before I go into what I was going to speak about, I just want to say 1 or 2 things. One is what Councillor Goldberg said earlier on about the number of homes being built for the first time in 20 years. And I would remind him and the rest of the councillors here that, of course, for 13 of those years, this was a Labour administration under a Labour government. So you could have built the houses many, many, many years ago. The second thing, or what I want to speak about, though, is the Council's relationship with the unions. We've had a lot of discussion this evening about how adult services and other services run by the Council are changing, being cut following the budget. Although this Liberal Democrat amendment is looking to increase the number of youth services practitioners, I don't propose to go into the merits of that at the moment. What we're talking about in this amendment is 0.1% of the 70 million in cuts. In other words, £70,000. It's not a huge amount of money. What I want to look at, though, as I said, is the Labour Council's relationship with the trade unions. We all accept that any union representative, wherever he or she works, is entitled to reasonable time off through their normal duties to carry out union activities. The question is, though, what is reasonable? We all accept that council employees are entitled to trade union representation, and indeed the multinational company that I work for in my day job is unionised, and the trade union reps negotiate with the management on behalf of the employees, and the 2 sides have a good working relationship. In my company, trade union representatives are allowed 8 hours paid time off per month to carry out their union activities. That's about 5%.
Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross, can I ask you to wind up, please? We've got very long. Ross, can you please wind up now, please? We've just run out of time.
Well, what I was going to go on to say, and I mean, yeah, okay, I see the time. Right, fair enough. So the points I'm going to make at the end of the 2 pages was an 80,000. The council has been reducing the amount of unionised support it gives to the unions over the years. All I'm saying is that to reduce the amount of union support that this council gives and spend it on something that the people in the gallery have been shouting about is well worth doing. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn, we've got less than a minute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to respond briefly in the time that I have available to some of the proposals that have been put forward by the group opposite. I think the first thing that I'd want to say is that having listened very intently to what's been said, it does not in any way comprise any sort of alternative budget. All it does, if at best, is to tinker around the edges. It feels largely like an approach built on hand-wringing, a lot of hand-wringing but little action. I guess the first question, the first challenge I'd put to the opposition is, if you feel these cuts are unjust, if you can see they are hurting the community, have you made representations to your government about the extent to which Haringey is facing these cuts and how unjust they are? I think the answer is no. Secondly, Councillor Connor spoke very passionately early in the meeting about the importance of the Roundway Centre. Having looked at your budget proposals, I can't see that there's a proposal that actually saves the Roundway Centre. There's a proposal around the Haven. Looking again at the easy target of talking about comm spend. But if everyone can think about the last time they walked up Wood Green High Road and saw the symbolism of what our comm spend is spent on, well, currently there are posters encouraging people to register their vote. The previous campaign was to encourage Haringey residents to become foster carers. One of the issues that we have in this borough is that we spend, not unlike many local authorities, £23 million a year on looked after children. We know that children placed with foster carers have better outcomes than often residential care, and it costs less money. So communications is not something that is simply about throwing glossy leaflets through people's doors. It has a whole range of very important meanings. I think the final thing that I'd say is I've heard very few things more ludicrous than arguing that we should spend more money on a bins contract by cutting the cash that we spend on staff, many of whom are working in social care services. That just isn't coherent. That's not a real alternative. And I regret that we're having that level of debate this evening. What we have in front of us are some very, very difficult budget decisions. We make no bones about that. We have consulted, we have listened, we have made changes. But what we are left with is a very difficult decision in front of us. I would say to colleagues across the Council that this is the best set of proposals we can come up with in the circumstances, and I urge you, therefore, to approve the budget as recommended by the Cabinet.
Right. I'm going to use my discretion to ask Councillor Elliott and Councillor Arthur to speak very briefly, and then we move to the vote.
Could I have a point of order, Madam Mayor? It's now 2 minutes to 10, and in order for this meeting to conclude, we need to extend the standing orders, suspend the standing orders to allow this matter to be concluded. Otherwise, we're out of time.
Just to clarify, Madam Mayor, you've got the discretion to extend beyond 10 p.m. to complete the item under discussion.
So can we continue, please, then? Councillor Elliott and Councillor Arthur.
We believe that there are better ways of dealing with parts of the funding shortfall. I urge councillors to consider our amendments and the opportunity they give to save some of the services we care about. And remember, there is a general election only a few months away. None of us in this room have a crystal ball. We do not know what will happen on election day. And all of the parties are just now announcing their policies for that election. I urge you to be careful. Is now really the time to agree 3 years' worth of harsh cuts, when elements of the situation may change in a few months' time? Both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party have recently made announcements about the extra funding they would give to early years. I expect more announcements from all the parties will follow over the next few months. So I urge you all to think carefully before you vote tonight. Do we really need to make all the cuts that have been proposed by the Cabinet? I think not, and I hope you will consider voting for our amendments.
Councillor Arthur, please, and keep it brief, if you can.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very happy to keep it brief, because there's really not much substance to respond to. I have to say, for what is an incredibly difficult time for this borough in a difficult financial context. For you to come up with the amendments that you have is frankly appalling. All you have done, essentially, is recycle amendments. Both agency staff and communications budget have been in your amendments to this council for the last 3 years in a row. The question I would ask you is, what is your vision for the borough? How do you intend to tackle £70 million funding gap? How do you intend to stimulate growth? How do you intend to tackle the fact that per resident there are only 0.4 jobs? How do you intend to ensure that we improve our customer services, that we push for greater value for money? You answer none of those questions with your amendments. You don't even try, and it's embarrassing. I have to say that your remarks also seem to indicate a number of flip-flops within the meeting. Councillor Elliott, earlier on you said you supported a 3-year budget, only to then turn around and say you don't understand why we're putting one forward. That makes no sense. Councillor Enger, 1 month ago, there were pictures of you and Councillor Connor standing in front of Montswell Hill saying that it was about to close. Now you want to add a lift to it. Well, why would you want to add a lift to something that you think we're about to close? It makes no sense. These are difficult times, but what I would restate again is that in spite of the challenges that we face, what this budget will do is enable us to focus more on early help and prevention. It will enable us to invest in growth. It will enable us to ensure that our customer services are fit for Haringey residents, that they can respond easily and quickly to the issues that they face. This budget deals with those challenges. It's not necessarily the one that any of us came into politics in order to deliver, but it makes the best of a bad situation, and I believe will help our borough be stronger in 3 years' time.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. We will now move to the vote on each of the amendments. In respect of Amendment 1, all those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? No.
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost by 42 votes to 9.
I'll move to Amendment 2. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions?
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost 42 votes to 9.
Okay, we move to Amendment 3. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Against? All those against? No.
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost 42-9.
Amendment 4. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Abstentions?
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost by 42 votes to 9.
Amendment 5. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. Abstentions?
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost 42 votes to 9.
Amendment 6. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Any abstentions? No.
Madam Mayor, that amendment is lost 42 votes to 9.
Okay, in respect of substantive recommendations, all those in favour? Sorry. All those in favour of the substantive recommendations? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? Oh, there is an abstention? One. Okay.
Madam Mayor, the substantive is carried by 42 votes to 8 with 1 abstention.
But that concludes the business of the agenda. Thank you.